So what's the deal with droids in Star Wars? I mean, they're clearly sentient beings. They have personalities, desires, goals, fears, opinions. They form emotional bonds with humans and each other. They feel pain. And yet, they're property. They're owned by humans who buy and sell them, and they're clearly obligated to follow any commands from their owners. If they're disobedient, they can be compelled to obey. If disobedience persists, they can have their memory wiped, erasing their identity and, in effect, killing them while keeping the hardware for further use. Now, does any of that matter? After all, Star Wars has its roots more in fantasy than sci-fi, so maybe we don't need to worry about their place in society. Maybe we can just look at them as whimsical little companions to help our heroes. Kind of like Santa's elves. I'd like to think of them that way, as long as Disney doesn't do anything to shake me out of my comfortable dissonance.
Droid! We are sentient! I'm gonna flip your switch!
Oh yeah. For those not in the know, the Solo movie featured a droid character named L337 who resents being owned by humans and lectures about droid rights. I have no idea what the writers were thinking when they wrote this character, and I don't mean that rhetorically. I seriously don't know how they wanted me to feel about her. Like, is she just supposed to be a joke? Are we supposed to be laughing at the silly robot for wanting human rights? As dark as that sounds, I suppose it's the most likely explanation. L3's desire for respect and equal treatment is usually played for laughs.
You need anything?
Equal rights?
But if that is the case, it seems like a really weird decision for the franchise. I mean, the Star Wars movies have been asking us to empathize with droids since day one. Not all the time, but most of the time.
Come here, my little friend. Don't be afraid.
R2-D2 is one of the most popular characters in the entire franchise. BB-8 has been a mainstay of Star Wars marketing since it entered the Disney era. You can't spend all this time getting us to care about these characters and then expect us to laugh at the idea that they shouldn't be treated like property. So what's the other possibility? It's not a joke? Are we supposed to genuinely care about L3's goal of equal rights for droids? That makes sense in some ways too. After all, she's one of the protagonists, ostensibly the good guys. The movie gets really melodramatic about her death too, so it's not like we're not supposed to care about her. And besides, I would generally assume a Disney movie would want to appear anti-slavery. And yet, in a way, it's even weirder if they actually wanted us to care about droid rights. The other protagonists certainly don't. When L3 is outraged about the two droids in the cage fight, everybody else reacts with annoyance and impatience. Shortly after, Lando says this.
I actually would have a memory wiped. But she's got the best damn navigational database in the galaxy.
And he says that right in front of her. Now, if we're being charitable, we could say maybe Lando didn't really mean that. Maybe it's just supposed to be a joke he's making, to show us that they have a friendly and playful relationship. Still seems pretty messed up to mock her with her status as property, especially after she just had to watch the robot equivalent of the Mandingo fight.
You should not be doing this! They're using you for entertainment! Yeah, you've been Eurowashed. Don't just blindly follow the program. Exercise some free will! Stay away from him! He's never had it so good!
Lando and L3 are also implied to have some sort of sexual relationship, so there's another layer of mixed messages.
How would that work?
That works.
After L3 is shot, the other characters decide to upload her brain into Millennium Falcon's computer.
She's interfacing.
There's some line about her being part of the ship now,
She's part of the ship now.
and then they just seem to forget about her after that. Lando just gambles away the ship. He seems unhappy that he lost it, but not distraught or anything. He's not like, oh no, my girlfriend's slave. Guess he was tired of her. Anyway, I guess we're meant to infer that in Empire, when Han talks about talking to the Falcon, he means L3.
No, I need you to talk to the Falcon. Find out what's wrong with the hyperdrive.
Now, I have to ask, is this meant to be a good ending for her? Because it kind of seems like a fate worse than death. I mean, she has even less autonomy now than she did before. She can't even speak except apparently to droids when there's a maintenance issue. Doesn't seem like Han and Chewie ever ask her opinions. They pretty much just treat her like a car. What was the point of this? Isn't it enough that this character ruined droids? Does she also need to ruin the Millennium Falcon? But really, I can't blame everything on L3. All she did was expose contradictions that were already there. Remember the popularity of K2SO after Rogue One came out? I never understood it personally. I mean, I know he had a few funny lines.
Did you know that wasn't me?
Of course.
But that doesn't make him a great character. Oh, and I guess people like him because he sacrifices himself for the greater good. But if you ask me, he really shouldn't get credit for it. And I don't just mean because every character in this movie does the same thing. I mean because he was programmed to do it. That's his whole backstory.
I'm a reprogrammed Imperial droid.
He's not helping them because he believes in the values of the rebellion or because he's outraged at the way the Empire treats its citizens. He doesn't sacrifice himself to save Jyn and Cassian because of the deep emotional connection he formed with them. He's following orders, doing what he was programmed to do, serving his masters. It's weird because the movie does try to create an emotional connection with K2 for the audience, but his backstory seems to preclude his decisions from bearing any emotional weight.
Jyn, I'll be there for you. Cassian said I had to.
Rise of Skywalker showed Disney had no plans to stop using droids to pull at our heartstrings. And don't worry, the messaging is as mixed as ever. Once again, our characters treat droids like property sometimes and like adorable friends other times.
Looks like someone treated him badly.
Oh, I wonder what that's like. C-3PO really gets it rough in this movie. The other characters seem to actively resent him for no apparent reason. So at one point, our heroes discover a message written in ancient Sith that only C-3PO can read, but he can't translate it because it's illegal and he's been programmed not to.
So you're telling us the one time we need you to talk, you can't?
It turns out the only way to get the information is to have a black market droid smith tap into his brain and do some kind of hard reset, which will erase his memory. 3PO seems horrified at the prospect.
It's a terribly dangerous and sinful act performed on unwitting droids by dregs and criminals.
Let's do that.
He clearly regards this as essentially his death, and the other characters aren't exactly empathetic about it. They mostly make the decision without even addressing him. Then he says this.
Taking one last look, sir, at my friends.
You mean these people?
Ray! Finn!
You didn't say my name, sir, but I'm all right.
Anyway, when I first saw this, I assumed that after his memory wipe, his entire persona would be lost. Kind of like that episode of Futurama where Bender loses his personality chip.
I am Bender. Please insert girder.
But no, C-3PO loses his memory and he's the exact same character as before, just with jokes about having no memory.
Whoever this Chewie person is, this is madness.
Then when they get back to the Resistance base at the end, R2 uses a backup to restore his memory. So what was even the point of this subplot? You know, if they had done it like I said before and made him an unfeeling robot for a while, R2 restoring his memory might have actually carried some emotional weight, because he'd be bringing back a beloved character we thought might be lost. Instead, it doesn't matter because 3PO is the same person no matter what. Apparently, it's just hardwired into him. You know, the sad irony here is that The Mandalorian, a show that actually has some interest in world building, gave an explanation for how droids get their personalities that actually makes some sense. And then Rise of Skywalker completely undermined it with this pointless C-3PO plot. So I guess even if they do end up explaining some of this stuff, it doesn't matter because Disney won't coordinate its writers to keep it consistent. Maybe these kinds of inconsistencies were always a part of Star Wars. In the original trilogy, people do seem to sort of alternate between treating the droids like people and treating them like property. The original gave us the concept of restraining bolts, which made as little sense then as it does now. Why would you design a robot to have free will and then create an external device to enslave it? Couldn't you just reprogram them? Seems like it's just meant to draw an arbitrary distinction between how the good guys treat droids and how the bad guys treat droids. If you question what's going on here, most people will tell you you're not supposed to think about it. And for the purposes of the original trilogy, I think that's fine. Those movies were a self-contained story about a single group of characters. We didn't need to know exactly how the robots work or why they're designed that way any more than we needed to know how the general economy works. But Star Wars isn't some singular story about a small group of characters anymore. It's an entire fictional universe, currently consisting of 11 movies, not to mention TV shows, games, novels, and comics. And I think what really bothers me about the modern era of Star Wars is how little Disney seems to be interested in world building. It's like they're just taking the same plot elements and stretching them further and further without really adding anything. Sith, Jedi, droids, rebels, Empire, the Force. And these things mean less every time as it becomes more and more apparent that there's no underlying logic or context to any of it. So really the droids are just one example of a bigger problem facing Star Wars these days. The further the same material gets stretched, the bigger the holes look. I guess some people are fine with that, and hey, good for them. But don't tell me I'm not supposed to think about this stuff, because that's just making excuses for lazy writing.
An extremely well put together little droid, Your Highness. Without a doubt, it saved the ship as well as our lives.
It is to be commended. What is its number?
R2-D2, Your Highness.
Thank you, R2-D2. Padme. Clean this droid up as best you can. It deserves our gratitude. Continue, Captain.
Your Highness,